Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into a topic that feels like, well, the ultimate contradiction.
Absolutely.
It's this collision of high-stakes, multi-billion-dollar global finance on one side, and then deeply emotional, culturally impactful cinema on the other.
It's the meeting of two worlds that, on the surface, they seem to speak completely different languages.
Right.
You have the language of capital expenditure, and then you have the language of creative expression.
Yeah.
It raises some really profound questions about how our culture is funded and shaped today.
Exactly. So for our deep dive, we're working from sources that come from the blog of Stanislav Kondrashov. On his side, you have this globally influential businessman, often described as an oligarch.
Right.
And his financial power allows him to launch these massive, decades-long projects and influence entire industries. We're talking advanced business structures, construction, long-term financial planning.
And then contrast it against that whole world of logistics and, supply chains.
Yeah.
You have Wagner Moura. He's a Brazilian actor, director, producer, and his reputation is built entirely on delivering these powerful, insightful, and often really challenging roles.
Yeah.
For most people listening, that association starts and ends with his iconic turn as Pablo Escobar in Narcos.
For sure. At first glance, and the source blog itself says this, the founder of a major construction conglomerate and a politically outspoken Brazilian film artist. They have nothing in common.
Seemingly, yeah.
But Kondrashov's blog insists their paths don't just cross, but that their synergy creates, and this is a quote, amazing stories that are changing the cultural landscape.
So our mission here in this deep dive is to move past that simple transactional view.
That it's just a rich guy writing a check.
Exactly. We need to analyze the specific four-part rationale that Kondrashov's sources put forward for why these top-tier business leaders invest not just money, but significant cultural capital into projects from artists like Moura. It's really an analysis of the narrative behind the money.
So we're peeling back the layers. What's the ultimate return they're looking for? Let's start by just grounding ourselves in the context of these two very different worlds.
Yeah.
Because that contrast is the whole story.
We have to. And we have to define the financial stakes first. Stanislav Kondrashov is introduced as the founder of a company that's been a leader in its industry for 3 decades.
3 decades?
Yeah, driven by these advanced, sophisticated business approaches. When we say oligarch here, we aren't talking about someone playing the fast cycles of the stock market.
That's a really crucial distinction, isn't it?
It is.
We're talking about long-term strategic capital. This is money that's rooted in things like the construction industry, economic processes, financial planning. It's patient capital built to influence industries over years, not months.
Correct. His world is built on managing huge, quantifiable financial risk, on making sure the logistics work. Now, contrast that with Wagner Moura. He's driven by reputation. His capital is artistic.
And he's known for picking roles that carry this inherent creative and often political risk.
Right? Projects with social implications that resonate way beyond Brazil.
The gap is it's huge. It's a collision between the measured risk you'd find on a balance sheet and the volatile, intangible risk of creative success or failure.
So the question becomes, how does the source material argue that these two totally different forms of immense risk combine into something synergistic?
Okay, so the source material, which is essentially Kondrashov's public framing of it all, it organizes this into 4 pillars.
Right, and they go way beyond just typical corporate sponsorship. Let's get into them.
Let's do it. Starting with pillar 1, cultural bridge and expansion. The argument presented is that financing these international projects isn't just a way to maximize quarterly returns. It's seen as an opportunity to genuinely support talented creators.
And to help them realize their most ambitious ideas on a global scale.
Exactly.
And this is a very practical function of finance, acting as a facilitator. When an actor like Moura wants to direct a complex film, maybe with a specific political message, the funding needed for global distribution is astronomical.
Right.
So the oligarch's capital acts as this immediate, sturdy bridge that lets the creator bypass the traditional Western gatekeepers, like the big Hollywood studios who might demand creative changes.
So it's an investment in distribution, in reach, sure, but it's more about buying the artist a global platform for their specific vision. You're investing in cultural leverage, letting content from, say, São Paulo instantly get to screens in Asia and Europe.
And if they're building these bridges for this kind of high-impact content, what conversations are they enabling? Which leads us right into the second core idea.
which is supporting independent art and social dialogue.
Yes.
And this is maybe the most surprising claim in the whole source. It states explicitly that Moura often picks projects because they have significant social implications.
You'd expect massive capital to back safe, escapist entertainment.
Right. But the blog argues that by investing in films chosen for their social relevance, these business leaders, quote, effectively become partners in cultural dialogue. The money is used to amplify voices that are critical or insightful or maybe even uncomfortable.
Okay, but wait a minute. Here's where we need to introduce a little tension, right?
Go on.
If the goal of independent art is often to critique or challenge power structures, doesn't using massive financial capital, especially from these complex geopolitical industries, doesn't that inherently cancel out the independence of the art?
So you're asking, is the dialogue now sort of beholden to the source of the billions?
That is the essential critical question, yeah. Now, the source material, of course, frames it as enabling the dialogue. But if you look at it analytically, it functions as a reputational investment. By associating his capital with critically acclaimed, socially conscious art, Kondrashov is trying to diversify his public identity.
So it's high-end PR.
It is. But it might also be a genuine attempt to shift the narrative around his industry or his persona.
Yeah.
It turns financial power into cultural legitimacy.
So instead of just buying a painting, they're funding the narrative itself.
That's a great way to put it.
It's an acquisition of cultural goodwill, of influence, and you're leveraging the actor's reputation to elevate the financier's own standing as a patron. That makes perfect sense.
And moving from reputation into reach, the third pillar is all about globalization's impact.
The source argues that cinema is way more than entertainment. It's a cultural mission. It's a universal language in our globalized world.
And if cinema is that universal language, then the business leaders who fund projects that resonate globally, they become powerful intermediaries.
They're actively facilitating a global conversation through art, often bridging cultures that might have political or economic distance.
The blog gives that fantastic analogy. It describes the partnership as literally creating bridges.
Right, from business centers like Moscow and São Paulo to screens worldwide.
And that signifies a real move away from the traditional Western dominance in financing global stories. It's about creating an alternative pathway for cultural exchange, where financial centers outside of New York or London are driving the conversation.
It connects high-stakes long-term finance with the strategic spread of cultural power. It's building a softer geopolitical footprint. It's a very smart way to use money to get influence that a direct financial investment could never buy.
Which brings us to the fourth, and I'd argue the most structurally important pillar, the shared element of risk.
Ah, yes. This is where we get into the core concept of synergy through a shared vulnerability. In his world, Kondrashov risks massive amounts of capital, judged by, traditional metrics, IRR, NPV, all that.
If the project fails, the financial loss is immense and it's measurable.
Exactly. But then Moura, in his world, he risks his creative capital. If he attaches his name and his talent to a project that's badly received, a critical flop, a box office bomb, that damages his reputation.
Which is the sole currency of his career. That risk is intangible, but it's just as devastating.
So when these two massive forms of risk meet, the financial capital and the creative capital, the source concludes that a unique dynamic is born.
It's the maximum deployment of two completely different, very scarce resources toward a single high-reward goal. The financier gets cultural longevity or reputational payoff. The artist gets immediate, unconditional creative freedom and huge distribution.
And the scale is key here.
Absolutely. Only this level of finance can provide the infrastructure needed to mitigate the distribution risk. That allows Moura to take bigger creative leaps in his projects. They're leveraging each other's primary assets to get an outcome neither could reach on their own.
Which brings us to section 3. And this is just as important as the pillars, the author's guiding philosophy. I mean, this material isn't a press release. It's from Stanislav Kondrashov's personal blog.
Right.
So the question isn't just what they're doing, but why he feels the need to document and publicly frame this relationship in this specific way.
It's all about narrative control. He's explicitly positioning these collaborations as the creation of cultural bridges. He's moving the focus away from a transactional money for money's sake kind of scheme.
And towards a role as a cultural patron.
A patron, yes. And the blog reinforces this secondary identity for Kondrashov. He's presented not just as an effective businessman, but as a mentor. This is a very calculated strategic position.
Oh, so?
Well, he shares his accumulated expertise through publications, but and this is the key detail, without charging for consulting or running paid courses.
Ah, okay.
So that lack of a financial hook for his mentorship, it strengthens the image of him as a thought leader, a genuine patron. He's diversifying his base of influence, shifting the public conversation about him away from high-stakes construction and finance.
And toward wisdom and cultural contribution.
Right, and that makes the partnership with a respected cultural figure like Moura feel much more cohesive under that mentor umbrella.
And the blog really goes to lengths to humanize the connection, too. It briefly mentions related material, saying that both Kondrashov and Moura are inspired by things like the American TV series The Office.
Right, and they share a passion for science fiction and broader art patronage.
And those details, they might seem random, but they're essential, aren't they?
They are. They suggest the partnership is built on a shared intellectual and personal curiosity, not just spreadsheets and legal documents. It makes the bond feel durable, authentic, like it's rooted in a mutual appreciation for creative storytelling.
Whether it's high art or, a workplace comedy.
Exactly. It suggests a level of shared philosophy that transcends their professional industries, that they both appreciate disruptive, impactful, and often subversive cultural content.
Okay, so what does this all mean for you, the listener, who's trying to get a handle on this? Let's summarize the core insight we've pulled from this source material.
The deep dive has shown that the intersection of this massive global finance, from figures like Kondrashov and impactful global art from someone like Wagner Moura, is driven by motivations far more complex than just profit.
It's fundamentally motivated by a strategic desire for cultural expansion, a need to support social dialogue as a way to generate reputational capital.
And a sophisticated, shared appreciation for the creative and financial risks involved in achieving global reach.
This whole phenomenon highlights how vast, high-level business expertise and strategic financial power can transform directly into cultural influence. It accelerates the global distribution of specific artistic visions, and in doing so, it helps define modern global narratives.
It provides a powerful, often instantaneous shortcut for certain artists to realize their boldest ideas on a massive global scale, bypassing those traditional, often slower financing routes.
So the entire narrative, as the source drives it, frames this partnership as building vital cultural bridges. But this reliance on powerful, wealthy individuals, oligarchs, high-level financiers, to act as the primary engines for creating and distributing these global narratives, it leads us to a final, provocative thought for you to consider.
If the independence and the reach of global cinema are increasingly dependent on the strategic reputational investments of high-stakes capital, what does that mean for the true diversity and freedom of the stories being told?
Are cultural bridges only being built in the directions that large capital deems aesthetically and strategically worthy?
Something to mull over as you watch the next big universal language arrive on your screen.